We are here to talk Buckeyes with you folks because these two professionals talked to the Buckeyes themselves this week. So they will interpret and we will discuss. Pull up for the next 60 or so right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. We do appreciate your contributions. Understand that if you cannot contribute financially, perfectly fine, obviously. Please hit the like button, subscribe. But if you can contribute financially, we would appreciate that because we've got two of the best here. Tony Gerdeman right next to me, BuckeyeHuddle.com. Buckeye Weekly is the podcast that you need to check out on a regular basis. Steve Hellwagon, Big Ten senior writer, senior Big Ten writer, Bucknuts 247 Sports. Guys, how we doing today?
Doing great.
Doing well.
Got to see practice. Are you guys seeing a little bit more than what you anticipated in regards to access to this team?
No, this is about usual. The first couple of days to get some pictures and video before they're in pads. And usually this is the only padded practice that we get to watch. It's the Student Appreciation Day. And, after the practice, the students mob all the players to get pictures and autographs. And it was really funny. The players were stretching after practice, and then they turned the students loose. So here's Jeremiah Smith over there trying to get his final stretches in, and people are crowded all around him and everything. And then he signed autographs and took pictures for about 5 minutes, and people were standing 15 deep around him. And he had a police officer with him to protect him, just to make sure he didn't get bumped into or anything. And then eventually they just whisked him out of there. So, it's good to be the king, I guess. So, he's the king of Columbus right now.
Yeah, he would. Brian Hartline said he tries to be the bad guy and pull him away at times, and you could see him in the scrum there, like looking like, how long do I need to wait before I grab him? But I've compared it on the previous podcasts to watching like the patrons follow Tiger on the 18th hole at the Masters, where they're just running. I would also maybe compare it to like the wedding dress store that opens during a sale, and all of the women just rush in, and that's kind of what it was. Once they let the students go, they surrounded Jeremiah, and then you just got 8 receivers sitting in a circle getting their stretch in, surrounded by hundreds of OSU students.
Yeah, I'm sure it's quite the scene. And when you guys mentioned access, the only reason I said that is it just seemed as though they were putting the clamps on. That's what was reported going into this offseason, that they were going to put the clamps on the media a little bit more. But it seems like your access is fairly usual. Now I'm also comparing that to what I'm hearing from other media people that we have on here on a regular basis. And it just seems like the restrictions are tightening and tightening and tightening all over the country. That's being reflected by what's being dealt with in the spring games, but even just the spring practices access. And maybe some of these programs should look at Columbus and say, hey, that guy won a national championship and he still allows reasonable media access. It can be done.
And they're playing a game, and it's going to be on Big Ten Network at 12 o'clock on Saturday. So all Ohio State fans should DVR, if you're not going to be at home Saturday, DVR the game, because it should be a lot of fun to watch a lot of the young players who have never really played for Ohio State, including those quarterbacks, Julian Sayin, Lincoln Keenholz, and Tavian St. Clair. They're all going to get their first real big run there at Ohio Stadium. So should be a lot of fun on Saturday at noon to see that. He's not afraid of it, it seems like.
And from what I hear, there are still tickets available. So bring the family, bring the friends, easy drive, free parking, all of that good stuff. Be there. Give the players something to experience, because as they say, the next time they're going to be in there is going to be the Texas game. So it's going to be, they'd like to have the players play in front of as many people as possible now before that Texas game.
So Steve, since you saw a practice on Saturday, how much did that closely reflect what we may see in a few weeks? And what did you draw from the look?
Well, I think that Lincoln Keenholz came out of the practice on Saturday with a lot of buzz. And again, it should be noted it's just one day out of 15, but it's a day when the students were there and the media was allowed to attend and gain some insight as to what was going on. And he played pretty well. He moved his unit up and down the field, was very efficient throwing the football, and also threw a perfect 40-yard touchdown pass to Carnell Tate on a fade route and hit him in stride going into the end zone. So those are plays that Ohio State fans got used to seeing, obviously, with Will Howard, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate this past year. Emeka Egbuka obviously was a big part of that offense as well. Now he's headed to the NFL. But, yeah, I think everyone has assumed from day one that this is Julian Sayen's job to lose. But I think Lincoln Kienholz has kind of throw his helmet into the race as well. And again, people ask, well, when do you think they'll make the announcement? And probably will be about 2 weeks before the Texas game is my guess. And again, I'm not anointing him as the starter based on his play for over a 1 hour stretch of one of the 15 practices, but he looked pretty good to me. So, I'm sure that it balances out over the entire 15 days. And Sayen's had his good moments as well. St. Clair just getting his feet wet at the college level, struggled a little bit at times, was put under some duress at times, and handled it reasonably well. Sayen was rushed one time, really, really good, and threw a ball off his back foot, kind of a real no-no. You never want to throw late off your back foot and just chuck it up for grabs. And lo and behold, Jermaine Matthews made the interception and celebrated like you just won the Super Bowl. So, it was one of those kind of days, I guess. But at any rate, give one check for Lincoln Kienholz on that day, and we'll see. The spring game on Saturday. If Sayen's got a couple aces up his sleeve, that he can make some plays on Saturday.
Yeah, the problem right now in the spring is every day when you talk to somebody who's there, it's like, well, today it was Julian, or yesterday it was Lincoln. Like, the problem is the lack of consistency right now. The good news is somebody's usually playing pretty well one day. It's just they need to continue to put it together. And I think what we saw was the 11th spring of practice, so it gives you an idea of how early things still are, and there are 20 some odd fall camp practices as well. But yeah, I would agree with Steve, and I think pretty much everybody. I haven't seen anybody say that they thought Julian had a better day on Saturday, but I know he was better in earlier practices earlier in the week. But that's and there have been times where Julian or where Lincoln has been better, other than just this practice. So they'll keep progressing, and I was impressed with Tavian St. Clair. He was live throughout, I think, all of the practice. And then in terms of just, it was not fair for him, basically, because he was getting pressured. So he was escaping the pressure. He was still looking downfield. He was finding receivers or throwing it away or picking up yards. But then later in the practice, towards the end of the practice, they made all the quarterbacks live, which was interesting. And I don't ever remember seeing a quarterback. One of a starting quarterback being made live like that, other than like JT Barrett and Cardale Jones in a circle drill together. That was about as close as we've ever seen to allowing quarterbacks to be hit. But Ryan Day talked about it on Monday that these guys just haven't played enough, and they haven't been hit, and they haven't been pressured. So this was an opportunity to do it now. Not that you want to see anybody get hurt, but if somebody did, you'd have some time to recover or whatever. Like, you're not looking for anybody to get hurt, but it's not something you do in fall camp, because then you're kind of screwed if something happens. So, there's one like a 4th and goal from the 7 or 8 where Julian Sayen had to take off running, and he kind of tried to dive for the end zone, and he got slammed down and blown up and stopped short. And it's just interesting to watch the quarterbacks be live like that. And because there are so many sacks, defensive ends and linebackers get sacks just by touching a quarterback in practice. And, you're watching, like I saw a crossing route with Mylan Graham where a linebacker just taps him and he's down. Whereas that linebacker was never going to touch him, and he was going to keep running, and he was going to make somebody else miss. And you kind of miss out on things like that. But interesting to see those quarterbacks live and see the speed of the game pick up when the defenders know that I have to really get this guy. And then you're allowing the quarterback to actually operate while playing football instead of not necessarily a 7-on-7 thing, but you kind of feel like you're in a cocoon and you're safe when you're not, when you're live.
Some of the guys that I thought really stood out, Dominic Kirks had a sack of Julian Sayin. He's I guess a redshirt freshman defensive end, I believe. He's wearing number 55. He did pretty well. There was a play on the goal line. 98, Caden McDonald, I think, got into the backfield and upended the runner for a 1-yard loss, probably. That was a heck of a play defensively. There were some pass breakups. I wish I could recall which of the DBs. There was one DB who was, I think, 21. I don't have a roster in front of me. Broke up 2 passes in a row. Was pretty impressive. I thought Bo Jackson at running back ran with great authority and great vision, made some great cuts, and looks great. So I thought Donaldson did some nice things. They threw a swing pass to him, and he made a tackler regret coming into his area, punished him on the business end of it. That was pretty cool to see. Wide receivers, Brandon Ennis made some plays. Mylan Graham, as you illustrated, made a couple of plays. Tony, is 11, is that Porter?
Yeah, Quincy Porter.
Yeah, Quincy Porter made a couple of really nice plays in this scrimmage as well. So all those guys, Max Clare, the new tight end from Purdue, made a couple catches that I saw. So, excuse me, it was a lot of different people over the course of it. I've got a video of 10 plays up on Bucknuts. Again, just really impressed overall with a lot of the things that I saw. I've got an offensive line rotation as well we can get into when the time's right as well.
I'll just say this about Quincy Porter. So he lost his black stripe after the practice. And I asked the coaches about it, asked Brian Hartline about it, and he said, well, I had nothing to do with it. That comes from, other coaches saying stuff and teammates saying stuff and guys on defense saying stuff where, like, they're telling him to get the black stripe off. Like, we need to get this guy's black stripe off. And Ryan Day said he's just been consistent. And all of these things that they're saying are things that they've said about Marvin Harrison and Carnell Tate in the past. It's not fair to compare anybody to Jeremiah Smith. He's a separate entity. If he actually is, whatever kind of entity he is, he's definitely separate from everybody else. But I went back and looked, and I tweeted this out. So that was the 11th practice. That's when Quincy Porter lost his black stripe. So Jeremiah Smith lost his black stripe faster than anybody in Ohio State history, and that goes back all the way to 2012 when Urban Meyer brought it back. So it's not forever, but it's still a pretty good slice of numbers. Jeremiah Smith lost it after 4 practices. Carnell Tate lost it after 5. Marvin Harrison lost it after 9. Chris Olave enrolled in the summer and lost his after 9 practices as well. Then Quincy Porter was 11 practices. Garrett Wilson was 12 practices, and Emeka Ibuka was 13. So you're talking about a bunch of first rounders there and some future first rounders, and he's right in the mix, Quincy Porter.
Yeah, sometimes this picture will pop up on social media where they're all gathered on the bench, all the wide receivers from about 3 to 4 years ago. That's quite impressive. And speaking of which, you guys caught up with the wide receivers. So what do those guys say? Hey, we're the best group in the country. We're not working on anything. What do they have to talk about?
Well, and Jeremiah, Brian Hartline was asked, like, what is he working on? And said it's the stuff, just stuff you may not even see yet. One of it's kind of like just being a more vocal leader. He's just a sophomore, but they want him to speak up more and bring along the younger guys, even though he is still a younger guy. But this room is so young that he's now a veteran. He's played a bunch, but things like that. And he said a lot of the stuff you wouldn't even notice on film because it's so minute and it's so finite, because he's already very talented, but he's not just trying. He's certainly continuing to get better. But you may, unless you are a technician of the position, you may not even notice it. But I thought one of the interesting questions was Jermaine Matthews made it to interviews this week because he missed when it was the defensive backs. and he was asked to name a receiver that we're not talking about enough, and he said Carnell Tate. And this is a guy that maybe we I don't think we do talk enough about, because we talk about Jeremiah Smith and Brandon Innes is coming on, and now Mylan Graham is finally going to get to play, and Quincy Porter just lost his black stripe, and you got old Carnell Tate there who's going to be probably one of the best receivers in the nation, and caught 50 passes last year for 700 and some yards, and he's almost an afterthought. But I promise you, he's not going to be an afterthought this year. And everything that coaches have said about Marvin Harrison, or just the maturity of all of these guys, that list that I mentioned, they also said it about Carnell Tate. And I think people need to remember that.
Yeah, I'm sure their site, Buckeye Huddle, has the same videos that we have over on Bucknuts with interviews with Jermaine Matthews and all of the wide receivers. I mean, I think they gave us just about everybody, every scholarship wide receiver down, Dejai Jones, however you say that, Dezie Jones, Philip Bell, Quincy Porter, then Bryson Rogers, and all the way up through Ennis, Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate. I don't know if I'm missing one or two in there, but we got them all. So no shortage of video. Then also yesterday, we got the specialists, John Furlman, the long snapper, Nick McLarty, the Australian who got to punt like one time last year, Joe McGuire, who was the starting punter, also from Australia, and Jaden Fielding from right here in the good old US of A, the kicker. I guess, Tony, he said that he was dealing with some type of injury during the Michigan game, and that's why he struggled and missed a chip shot in there that obviously could have changed the outcome of that game and changed the course of human events. I mean, let's say they go on and beat Michigan, and then something wacky, they take a different path than the path that they had to get to the college football playoff. Maybe it didn't work out, but hard to imagine a tougher path than the one that they had. So I don't know, but maybe there'd been some complacency if they'd entered as Oregon did as the Big Ten champion.
Yeah, I don't think you don't want to change anything about the way things happened last year, because talking to one of the questions I was asking at the NFL Combine was like, what was the turning point of the season? And it's like, it was the Michigan game that turned everything around. And if that didn't happen, then, maybe they just go through the motions like Oregon did. And they continue to believe that they can't be beaten, even though they lost to Oregon earlier in the year. And so that was a meaningful loss, and they made the most of it. And you see the results. I think Jaden Fielding, he may have said that he was banged up from like week 3 of the season, and he was just dealing with that. And if you remember the 3 kickoffs out of bounds against whoever last year, like right
the
in the
kickoff debacle, one of
Yeah,
their blowout wins, he's kicking the ball out of bounds.
and I think that was injury related as well. But always good to get touch base with the specialists, because we've seen literally nothing of them other than some punting, and at that point you're only watching the returners, not the punters. And when the thing about watching the punting, the balls get hit in the rafters of the WAC, so like they try to catch them and try to do a mock return, but half the time the balls are bouncing around in the rafters, so one of the coaches just has to throw a ball up for the returner to catch. So, and they don't really do like any kickoff returns at this point, and they don't do much during the fall camp because it's a lot of contact, and so you've got to protect yourselves. And so special teams, they do still exist, and I think everybody expects them to be better this year, because whoever is punting will be better than they were last year, you would assume. Jaden Fielding healthy, has got a ton of experience, so we'll see how that goes. And John Furlman, the long snapper, has returned, and if nobody knows who you are, then you're doing a pretty good job as a long snapper, and I think he did that last year.
I got to think at some point Ryan Day has assessed this wide receiver run and thought, how do we, being the national champion, they certainly are doing well at other spots, but this is just unprecedented practically and ridiculous to just say, okay, how much of it's Heartline, how much of it is the offense that we run and the quarterback play we've had? How do we try to replicate this this type of recruiting and development at all the other positions?
Yeah, that is a tremendous question. And I know that David's got the question on the screen there about Chris Carter and what potential role he might have. I don't think he's there for any kind of lengthy permanent time. He's a guy that kind of pops in and out. He's very busy. And he lives, I think, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, is where he calls home. And he helps out with one of the high schools down there, as I recall. I'm not sure if he's still doing that, or if he's involved with the 7-on-7 stuff that's kind of proliferated down there. I'm not sure, but I don't think he has any kind of formal role. I think they welcome him with open arms as a elder statesman of the game whenever he comes around, and somebody who's lived life, obviously, and had some great life lessons along the way, kind of like Maurice Claret was there yesterday after practice, talking with different people and players. And I think it was Dom Taberry from Channel 10 was sitting there with him and one of the current players. And they were kind of chopping it up. Dom's been around since the 70s. Maurice, played in 2002 and was around a little bit in 2003. And then, the current players, have to listen to these stories and different things and different perspectives. And I think it's all good for these guys to hear, what the real world out there is all about. So I think that's Chris Carter's role as much as anything, life coach, and some receiving tips when asked about it, if somebody wants to bend his ear or get his 2 cents on it. But I don't know that there's a formal role for him. I guess that's something that Ryan Day can answer. I think they welcome him, the few times a year that he's able to make it to practice or come to a game. He is front and center right down there, with everybody. So he's very much welcome. And obviously, this became because of Urban. Urban was a GA for Earl Bruce and was assigned to work with the wide receivers. And he and Chris Carter became, as Chris Carter described, best friends, at that point. So, and their relationship has continued, in the decade since then. So that was kind of his entree to come back and be a part of the program. His son, Duran, obviously was with the team. I think the latter stage of the Tressel era, perhaps, or I don't know if that overlapped with Fickle and Meyer. I'm not sure. But at any rate, they're just happy to have him around again as a guy that the players can, talk to, and he can provide some counsel to some guys about what he sees as well.
Yeah, he's been around for years, and he's not the only, as Steve said, he's not the only former Buckeye that stops by. I mean, every practice you're going to see somebody familiar. But I do remember years and years ago, maybe a decade ago or so, Chris Carter was at a practice, and he was helping somebody out. And I put it in like my practice notebook that Chris Carter was showing somebody something. And then it got brought to my attention that that might be an NCAA violation because only coaches can coach. And it's funny to think how far we've come now that, Chris Carter showing somebody, get your feet down or, get your hands up. That's a no-no. But now the good thing now is you can have unlimited coaches. And so, they've got 4 guys helping on the offensive line. And Devin Jordan is Brian Hartline's right-hand man with the receivers. And so, it wouldn't surprise me if they continue to bolster the coaching staff. I think they will. But, Chris Carter, like Steve said, he's got a lot going on. And, there was a big to-do when LaCharles Bentley was tweeting some stuff with some former players, and people were wondering, is he going to be on staff? Is he going to be on staff? It's just Buckeyes coming back, paying forward, paying back, all of that stuff that you always hear about, because they've all gotten their own experiences. And LaCharles Bentley's got tremendous experiences. Chris Carter does. Maurice Claret certainly does. And you bring in a Troy Smith or a Terrell Pryor, like all of these guys have been through it and more, and they all have value that they can add.
Well, Steve, you checked out the offensive line in particular.
Yeah.
What did you gain from who was playing with whom in what spots?
Yeah, he had a question on there I saw in the queue about Austin Siereveld and what position he might line up for the Buckeyes. They've talked a lot about having positional versatility for a lot of these guys to be able to play guard some and tackle some. my experience watching the practice on Saturday, the only player with positional versatility was Austin Sierreveld, at least from where I was sitting. I taped about 40 or 50 plays and cut them down to 10 for my video. And I charted each series who was lined up. And it's kind of surprising. At left tackle, there were only two guys who played, and it was Ethan Anianwa, the transfer from Rice. It looks like he's pretty much entrenched as the starter at left tackle, and I thought he did a pretty good job on the whole. And then behind him is the true freshman, borderline five-star offensive lineman Carter Lowe. When we interviewed him last week, I asked him, I said, Carter, where do they have you repping at? He goes, just left tackle. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. So they think he's special. Obviously, it's going to be Anianwa this year with Lowe backing him up, it seems like, and then Lowe's job the following year. So I think you can kind of put that one in concrete right there. Left guard, I had four guys repping with Luke Montgomery with the first team, then Austin Sierreveld and Devontae Armstrong kind of mixing in with the second team. And I think it's Jake Cook, the true freshman from Westerville North. He was also repping there. Those four guys were all seeing time there, but I think that's Luke Montgomery's job with the way he came on the last two games and played in the playoff. Center, you had Carson Hinsman as the starter with Josh Padilla backing him up. And I figured within this positional versatility thing that Padilla would be repping some at guard. But when we talked to him last week, he said strictly at center. So take that for what it's worth. He's the backup center, and I think he'd do a good job if they had to put him in there. And then they have a walk-on Lawrence. I didn't get his first name. Was also repping a little bit at center as well. But the only two scholarship guys that were doing it were Hinsman and Padilla. I think Montgomery has done it a little bit in the past as well. Right guard, you had four guys. You had Tegra Shabola, who most people think is probably the starter at right guard. Then Austin Sierreveld was also there. Gabe Van Sickle, I think, as a redshirt freshman, was there. And Javon McFadden, a true freshman. They were all repping there. And then right tackle was Philip Daniels, the transfer from Minnesota, was pretty consistently the starter, with Deontay Armstrong and then Ian Moore backing him up. So, again, I don't know the exact pecking order between Deontay Armstrong and Ian Moore, if one of them was getting more run than the other. But, and Austin Sierreveld also took a series at right tackle as well. So he repped at left guard, and right tackle in the course of this scrimmage from what I could tell, unless I'm off somewhere. But in terms of where do we think Austin Sierreveld is going to start, I think that's completely up in the air. And I think Tyler Bowen, this is crazy to say this, he could look at left guard, and right tackle. He's got four guys basically for three spots, and say the three guys who practice the best this week, those are the guys who are going to play. And those are the guys who are going to start. And I don't rule out the idea that Sierreveld could spell Montgomery. He could spell Shabola, and he could probably also spell Philip Daniels at right tackle. Heck, he may win the right tackle job. I'm not giving it to Daniels. We heard Sierreveld has rep there a little bit as well. So starting, don't worry so much about that. It could be a fluid situation. Last year, they started 6 or 7 different offensive line combinations, and it worked out reasonably well for them. The Michigan game notwithstanding, that was kind of a clown show. But, I think otherwise, Sierreveld's going to play. He was one of 3 Iron Buckeyes on the team. Jeremiah Smith was one. Sierreveld, who was the third one, Tony? You're good at these little
Sonny
Styles. Woo, yeah, wow. That's good company. Only 3 of them is kind of surprising, but because ordinarily they'll usually have 5 or 6, give or take. But those 3 must have really, really stood out above and beyond the rest of the crowd during the strength and conditioning training, just those few weeks they had from the championship game to spring break. So, to me, I like the offensive line. I we've sat here in the spring the last few years and watched the defensive line just cave them in day after day, practice after practice, and it wasn't really like that the other day, I didn't think.
Yeah, I'm just going through my notes, and I had Searveld at right tackle with the ones at points. And then Ian Moore later on in practice was with the ones at left tackle and mixed in there, but he was also with the twos at left tackle, which is interesting to me as well, where, they're going to, unless you're a freshman, if you play the left side, you're also going to play the right side. You're going to mix in and do some things. And so will Austin Searveld be the starting right tackle at this point? I think it's a race between him and Ian Moore and Philip Daniels. And I guess you probably go with the experience there. But I also wouldn't negate the possibility that he could be at right guard as well. And if Ian Moore or Philip Daniels can show that they are better than Tager Shabola in terms of being one of the top five, the versatility of Austin Searveld gives them that liberty or that luxury of going with their best five, knowing that they'll probably be okay. So I was talking with Austin Searveld when we did, like he's fine with moving around because he feels like where he's going to have a job. I think he feels pretty confident that he's going to have a starting job when this is all said and done. So, he's got the kind of versatility that they like, and people seem to be convinced that he can handle it at tackle. Now it'd probably be easier for him at right tackle. And, Ethan Anianwa came in at 365. He's down to 335 now. So he's moving better than he has because he was 345 his last year or two at Rice and needed to drop some weight. And even Carter Lowe came in at like 341 and he was down to 321. I think some of the freshmen had talked about how when you go on the road for like 2 weeks with the Buckeyes during the bowl trips, you can maybe kind of put on some weight.
They were whining and dining, the boys.
So, then you got to come back to reality after the season and realize, I shouldn't have had that fourth steak.
Yeah. Or all those mashed potatoes. Oof.
Folks, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Late arriving crowd on a Wednesday morning here. So we got about 113 on the line between all the platforms. And most of you missed some of the discussions you're talking about in the chat, meaning quarterback play. So the competition was talked about. So we hit on quarterbacks. These two talked to wide receivers and checked out Saturday's practice as well. So at the end of the show, just go back and check out what you missed.
Bring me the little dog too.
Or 35 minutes.
My wife is sending the dogs in. I held up the one dog a few years ago when we first got him. And now, looky here. We got a little puppy.
Oh, look at that guy. He's a cutie.
Golden Doodle. It's a she, Peaches. Would you believe my wife and family nicknamed this little girl dog, named her Peaches Sawyer. That is what they're calling her. So Peach, because they won the national championship in Atlanta. Sawyer, not sure where that comes from, but at any rate, Peaches Sawyer is the newest addition. I've not always thought we needed the third dog, but she's okay. She's all right, and she's learning very quickly how to operate. So we're doing pretty good on dogs. Don't send us any more dogs.
Don't win any more national championships.
Oh, yeah. I guess if they win another national championship, we'll have to get one and call it Jeremiah, maybe. I don't know.
Jeremiah Bullfrog.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, if you need any training, my son's only about 8 or 9 hours away, but he's a dog trainer.
Awesome.
He posts his wizardry with dogs one day versus a week later on social media.
You know what I've found is, and this is kind of cool, YouTube has got videos that you play YouTube on your television now, just, call it right up. They have dog videos like with soothing music and everything. So when I just want to chill and get the dogs to chill, I'll just dial up YouTube, and sometimes it's dogs with cool music, or it can be other animals out in the forest or whatever with cool, just soothing music. So, that I've been doing a lot of that lately. So I don't know.
Yeah. My cat has a tablet for that. squirrels and birds, and there are YouTube videos where people put cat games on there with
Yep.
animated just things, and it's one way to keep him from bothering me during the show. And I'll just turn his tablet on, and he'll just lay there and fall asleep on it.
Oh,
Used to be
Good
my
stuff.
tablet.
Are the other dogs there in the household, Steve, named after Buckeyes?
well, we had a dog, a golden, when our kids were young, about 20 years ago, a golden named Brutus. And he lived to be 12, 13, maybe 10, 12, 13. And he had a health issue, and he passed away while our kids were in college about 6 years ago. And then we added Quincy, who is a golden, but is a girl, no tie to Ohio State, Quincy. And then our white doodle that we have, and I held him up previously, like when we first got him a couple, 2-3 years ago. His name's Doc. So we got Quincy, Doc, and Peaches are the 3 dogs. So no more dogs.
We had a dog named Trestle. And then the next dog was Toby. That was based on my favorite Indians player when I was a kid, Toby Harrah.
Indians and the Rangers, right?
Absolutely. Later with the Yankees, but yeah,
Yankees.
Rangers traded for Buddy Bell, 1978.
Yeah.
There it is. All right. Ryan Day, Brian Hardline, Matt Patricia. Did any of those guys say anything that really mattered or stood out?
Well, it was a long time ago. That was
2 full days. I think Day talked about how, again, he wants to have what resembles a football game on Saturday with so many young players needing to prove themselves and just needing the experience of playing live football, that they don't really get many opportunities to do that. I mean, some of it will be what they call thud, where they just tag the ball carrier when some of the older guys are in there. But then after that, they will get around to playing a little bit of smash 'em up tackle football, which will be kind of cool. Let's see. Ryan Day did say that Lincoln Kienholz is doing what he needs to do to put his name in competition. He says he feels Kienholz and Julian Sayin are further along, obviously, than Tavian St. Clair, which tracks because he's just a true freshman. And at this point, so right now it's a 2-person battle to be the starter, and no indication that that's going to be decided or announced anytime soon. He's very bullish, I think, on just about every other position group. I mean, he was very positive about a lot of things in that press briefing on Monday, and kept it pretty light and lively, I thought. So there weren't a lot of concerns that I heard coming out of him. Hartline, as the coordinator, he also got hit with questions about almost every other position group on offense, and talked about how they're going to need several running backs. So don't look for it to just be James Peoples. That CJ Donaldson is doing good. Obviously, Bo Jackson, we mentioned earlier in the show. And this was funny when Day was ticking off the running backs. Even Sam Williams-Dixon, who was kind of an afterthought last year as the true freshman, and so afterthoughted that he went into the portal for a brief amount of time, and then rescinded that and came back to Ohio State. And you can call him the number 4 running back, I guess, right now, if you like, but I think he's playing at a little bit better clip than that. So, do they have a 1 yet? Maybe, maybe not. Peoples and Donaldson, with Bo Jackson nipping right at their heels. But Sam Williams-Dixon is better than your normal 4. Let's just put it that way. So that's kind of my view of how that position looks. I don't know, Tony. Those were some of the high points, at least from Day and Hartline. Patricia, I wasn't writing Patricia, so somebody else was on our staff. So I'll be very honest with you. I kind of zoned out a little bit when he was talking because I was trying to work on some other stuff. But I think that he's very happy with what he's seeing, obviously. and said that 4-2-5 is probably the base, just because of the way that college football offenses have moved to playing a lot of 11 personnel and some 12 personnel, and which is 11 is one back and one tight end with 3 receivers, and 12 is one running back with two tight ends. So you need that extra safety on the field when they have that extra receiving target out there, is kind of the way he puts it. So those were a lot of the high points. I don't know, Tony, you were listening just same as I was. Did anything else from the 3 of them really stand out to you?
Yeah, I think the one concern that I think Ryan Day has is defensive tackle right now.
Yeah, definitely. That's right.
Yeah, behind Caden McDonald and Edric Houston. And honestly, those 2 guys need to continue to step up as well. But behind them, they need more, and Ryan Day has said as much. And Matt Patricia's message was that you need to prove us right, because we brought you here for a reason. Now you need to start playing like it. Because I keep saying, like, they're gonna be looking in the portal for defensive tackles because they need depth, and the guys that they've got behind their top 2 have not really done much. And Tywan Malone is the most experienced, and he's played here and there and played sparingly, but done what with it? And what is Jason Moore and Will Smith and Eric Mensah? Like, they need to get something out of those guys, and I don't think they're gonna. I think Ryan Day even said they're gonna need to see a lot more in these next few practices to feel better about the situation. And I don't know that they'll see enough for them to be convinced that they don't need to go into the portal. Now, that doesn't mean there's going to be somebody in the portal, or that somebody that is in the portal won't be wanted by everybody. And it's got to be the right guy, and it's got to be the right price, and all of those things. But I think that if there's a concern on this team right now, it's probably depth at defensive tackle. And honestly, you might want to talk about the entire defensive line, because CJ Hicks is your 3rd or 4th defensive end at this point, and Logan George is your 3rd or 4th defensive end at this point, and he's come from the FCS. And Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry are your top 2 guys, perhaps, and they've never really produced over the course of a season because they've been stuck behind 2 really good players. So the entire defensive line is a concern. I think I feel better about the defensive ends than I do defensive tackles, though.
If you don't want to look at us, you can listen to us. Favorite audio platform, we are there. Ohio State Live, and we've added iHeartRadio this week as well. Amazon, Apple, and Spotify. What's going on, Tony, at Buckeye Huddle and with the Buckeye Weekly podcast?
Well, I just posted a couple of stories yesterday. The most recent one was about Quincy Porter losing his black stripe, and kind of the history of the black stripe a little bit, and the receivers that we mentioned earlier. And then I also just posted a linebacker notebook from this morning, about an hour ago before we jumped on. James Laurinaitis talking about Sonny Styles growing in his 2nd year as a linebacker, even though he's now a senior, and Laurinaitis' own growth as a coach, what he's learned, and things like that. So you can find all of that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And then Buckeye Weekly, I think we did we're going to do something. We've got some listener questions coming up this week that we'll address. We'll have our bold predictions show for the spring game, which bold predictions. We do bold predictions every game, right? And normally it makes sense to do it for the regular season and playoff games. Doing it for a spring game makes no sense, but we do it every year. And I don't even know what is bold for. Like, James Peoples running for 40 yards. Is that bold? I have no idea. Like, Lincoln Keenholz throwing for 200 yards. I don't know, but we work it out. And then, and so you can find that all this week at the Buckeye Weekly podcast.
Julian saying getting tapped 4 times.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what is a lot of sacks? Like, Solomon Thomas had 7 or 8 sacks one spring game or one spring scrimmage, so like, if I say Kenyatta Jackson has 4 sacks, is that, I guess that's a lot, but if you say like 1.5, I'm sorry, that's not bold enough.
Well, you were the creative one, Tony. You'll come up with something good. I am assured of that. Steve, what's going on at Bucknuts?
Just keeping busy, preparing for the spring game. We're going to share a lot of these interviews. I mean, we've interviewed just about every scholarship player on the roster, with a few minor exceptions, I think, over the last 4 weeks. So, a lot of those guys have some great stories that we want to share, and we'll be doing that, in the next few days and weeks, and obviously covering the spring game as well on Saturday, and just looking for some great competition and for some guys to show what they're capable of. That's what this is all about this time of year, is individual development. And where you were a month ago, you need to be a much better football player by the time, spring football ends, and then go back and work on, your strength and your conditioning the next few months, and get ready for the start of preseason practice, August 1st or thereabouts. And, that's what it's all about. So we're looking forward to it on Saturday. Otherwise, just keeping busy with the usual stuff, and just doing our best, to try and be there for our subscribers. I did a chat on our site last night and answered questions. One guy asked 12 questions, so I went through and dutifully answered each one of those, and asked me my favorite play from the season. I think the strip and scoop play, or whatever, that Jack Sawyer had, was good. But I'm going to tell you, for tone-setting plays, the touchdowns to Jeremiah Smith to start the Tennessee game and the Rose Bowl, both in the first few minutes of those games, were just so huge. I mean, they just put those opponents, Tennessee and Oregon, back on their heels in the first minute of the game. It's like, you can't stop us, and don't even try. It was kind of the message when they came out firing the way that they did in both those games. So I kind of had I think the Rose Bowl, to me, was the most dominating performance I've seen an Ohio State team have against a top 10 team, a top 5 team, a number 1 team. I mean, you're up 34-0 on the number 1 team in the country in the second quarter. I mean, it was, the game was over. So I said that was probably the moment for me, just because that tipped off an avalanche to where at that moment you knew this may very well be the best team in the country. Right here, we're watching them, and they're not in the green and yellow and gray and white, or whatever the hell that was that Oregon was wearing.
Yeah, they treated Oregon like C.J. Stroud would treat Michigan State during his career.
That's good.
Or like Jim Tressel used to treat Pat Fitzgerald.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it was quite the display. Wow, it was quite the display.
Ryan Day and Loxley. Ryan Day and Schiano.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, run the numbers on that Maryland and Rutgers series in terms of score differential. It's
bad.
It's interesting. Yeah.
It's bad.
Like 50-10 average.
Although
like
Maryland did give them hell
Mm-hmm.
a couple times. That game that nearly went,
Sure.
They had the ball at the 2-yard line, Maryland did, and, had the pass incomplete on 4th down or whatever. But yeah, it's been pretty one-sided, these rivalries.
Well, looks like it's one-sided toward the players versus the NCAA at this point. Of course, it's pretty much a done deal in regards to these players getting paid. The athletes across the board for these programs, but what to do with the money, it's not finalized. It probably won't be for at least a week. A lot of corrections to be made on the NCAA's behalf, and T's to be crossed and I's to be dotted. This is what I'm looking at. This is what I think is the interesting part. So let's say the $20.5 million gets passed through, and that's what each program is dealing with in regards to an entire athletic budget to pay athletes. Okay, if I'm in charge at any particular university, albeit there could be Title IX issues to deal with and so forth, but if it's just cut and dry, this is what I have to deal with, I am going directly to the amount of money that each one of these programs brings to the table. And I'm doing the math and saying 88% goes to football. They get 88%. Men's basketball, 9%. They get that. That's what I'm doing. And then that to me is not as interesting, although I know it's going to get much more complicated than that. Is the second layer of that is, let's say you got $18 million for this football team. How in the world do you determine who gets what?
Well, I think that they're going about it the right way, that the starters and the older players and, the stars like Jeremiah Smith are commanding, the lion's share of that money. And they've lost some 5-star recruits because they didn't want to pay them up front and the going rate. And, that's fine. I have no issue with that. People are like, well, you can't let that happen either. It's like, well, it's not an unlimited pool of money. This was a funny story. Ohio State was contemplating transfer for basketball, and he and his people were trying to figure out what his price tag should be. And he said, we'll do $500,000. And the guy who was advising him said, look around at your production and what you did, and you're worth much more than that going into your second, third, fourth year, because you're going to produce more than that. He said, maybe you should put it at $800,000. And he and his dad were kind of like, well, we don't want to overprice and not end up at a place where we want to end up, which has happened. Ohio State has heard bids from some of these guys or projected salary numbers and turned them down and never gone back, didn't lower their or raise their offer. And the kid never lowered his number. So you run the risk of not getting to the place you want to go. And the guy advising them came back, as I'm being told, and said, look, it's not their money. It's not, this isn't like you're dealing with the Paul Brown family down with the Cincinnati Bengals. You're dealing with, state employees and collectives who have raised this money. It's not a personal stake in this for any of these people. The guy says it's not their money. Ask for all of it you can get. And boy, oh boy, that's what we're seeing across the board right now.
I do think the whatever that number ends up being for football collectives, then it's kind of like a matching 401k. Like they will double that then basically. And whether it's doubling the 20.5 or doubling whatever goes to football, it's not just going to be $15 million going to football, because the collectives are going to add to it. And there will be some sort of goal of doubling it or whatever. And then it just continues to grow. And now they do want to put in the quote unquote guardrails and the punishments, but I'm still wondering, although it was good to see I think the judge in this whole case yesterday said, like, all of these people, these institutions have agreed to these NCAA rules, right? So, what complaints do they have? And I'm like, that's what I've been saying forever. Like, if you're agreeing to be part of this, then, what grounds do you have to sue for anything, basically, and sue for some of these things? So, like, the NCAA can set ground rules, and then if you choose to be part of the NCAA, then you follow those rules. And so, like, there could be a bubble around this thing, some guardrails, and then maybe it gets back to quote unquote normal, or we can keep this as the normal. But things never get cheaper unless they're TVs.
Yeah. That's the only thing that goes down in price. The United Way, you've heard of that. They have the big push every year to set a goal and whatever, and donate money, for programs to help kids after school and libraries and cancer, causes and different things like that. Forget about the United Way. Donate to your collective if you're an Ohio State fan. Make, every dollar counts. So, get in, donate early and often.
And I'll also say this: the price of Girl Scout cookies right now, outrageous. Give to your collectives.
Hell with that. Yeah.
There's like $6.50 a box, $7 a box. What are we doing here? Come on.
What's going on?
I haven't touched any Girl Scout cookies in a couple of years. I just haven't seen them anywhere. I don't have anyone around here selling, I guess, because those are impossible to turn down. So what about this? And this, again, a simplistic way to look at it, but if we're looking at roughly 20 million just to make it easy, 100 players, 105 players to be technical, but basically it's $200,000 per player. Don't you let the NILs create the differential between the stars and the good players and the first teamers and the second teamers and on down the line, and just give everyone $200,000, because otherwise you're looking at possible mess and trying to differentiate between the starting left guard and the starting right guard versus this person or that person, or the player that is not highly regarded going into the season and as a breakout year versus the star that gets hurt the first game and doesn't, or just is a bust that particular season, and then trying to work out compensation and what could be a mutiny in regards to dealing with that.
Yeah, I think it lays a good baseline. I don't know if I would use the entire allotment. I'd maybe go half, and like everybody starts out for the 100,000. That way, it gives you more money to play with. I think it's kind of like the sports where you don't get full scholarships, and baseball gets like 11.3 scholarships over 25 players. And how does it get allotted? If you're really good, you'll get a full scholarship, and if you're just okay, you'll get 0.2 of a scholarship. So I think this has already been going on in college sports for a while, this sort of allotment based on how good you are. And so, yeah, it will be interesting, but I do think the collectives then come in, and like, that's when you need somebody, it's like, hey, we need to go get this guy. And where the funds come from? That's going to come from the collectives, maybe.
Now we are getting reports in from our chat, trying to keep us healthy and staying away from the Girl Scout cookies. My thought is, yes, I am trying to do my best at an older age to eat better, but still, my goodness, if we could stack the Oreos that I've had, double stuffs in my lifetime, they're in the tens of thousands easily. So at some point, I just think, you know what, I'm going to live a long life, I believe. And, it just seems like it just whatever. I go back and forth. Like one day I try to eat healthy, then the next day I'm like, screw it. All right. Well, guys, appreciate you being here. I hope you guys out there listening and watching appreciate these two, because they've shown up 312 times. Good Lord, 312 shows with these two. So get there for Tony Girdman and Buckeye Huddle, Buckeye Weekly's the podcast, and of course Steve at Bucknuts. And we'll make it on back here at some point next week, most likely on Wednesday, but we shall see.
Is this the 6th year? Is 652 divided by 6? Is that 300? Or...
Well, 52 and 6 would be 330, right?
I don't know. Sure, if you say
so.
So.
We're wrapping our 6th year.
50 and 6 is 300.
That's crazy.
Sorry, I have an Ohio State education. I don't do good at math.
Yeah, I was told there'd be no math.
Kent State, can I really? Okay, folks, we'll see you back here next week at some point. Yep. Just be listening for those notifications, and we will see you soon.